link the link to this presentation will be provided to all of you. It will be posted in the Google Drive, where if you've had a chance to look at the government provided information, you will have seen that in there. And that is the drive where we will put a document that has the link to the recording of this session, so you can go back and review it. And of course, there are others that don't have a chance to join us today. This is what you can expect us to cover in the next hour to hour and a half. Whether or not we go to 4:30 will depend somewhat on how much conversation we get in, the questions and answers. Feel free to put your Q&A in the chat as well. And yes, hopefully that answered your question about the asset being made available. I am going to take a few minutes just to give you a very quick overview of Team Orlando and TechGrow. I think it's important to set the context for who we are and why we're executing this prize challenge on behalf of the Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division. And then we will go directly into some conversation about the problem statement and some conversation about attributes or function, how the Navy would like the situation to look different. Let me put it that way, because this is not the kind of things, hopefully, where you're going to get a lot of specs and requirements. The whole point is for all of you to really exercise your innovative approach to AI and ML for this part of the acquisition process. What you will hear today from our experts here from the Navy, and we have a whole room full of folks, as you see, that can answer just about any question you might want to ask about this acquisition process. But what you'll hear from them is conversation about what the challenges are that they deal with now, what they face that they'd like to eliminate, and what they would like to be able to do with a really viable solution. We'll take some time to go over the challenge process itself in terms of registration and submission, key dates, and certainly along the way, we will be watching for your questions that you submit through chat. For those of you that are not familiar with the Team Orlando community, it is quite a unique collaboration anchored here in Orlando, Florida, and a very long-standing one, over 60 years old, starting by the Navy and then the Army coming on board and deciding to collaborate. Over the years, other organizations have come to join this collaboration as well. But I'm going to talk about these three legs of the stool, if you will, of the Team Orlando community here. Team Orlando itself, the Central Florida Tech Bridge, powered by Naval X, and then certainly TechGrow. Team Orlando, I mentioned it is a collaboration, and there are actually more logos that we're in the process of putting on this slide. We have some new DoD and other national security entities that are joining Team Orlando because of this mission that all of them participate in, and that is improving human performance through simulation and training. And many of the services realized a long time ago that there was extraordinary power in working together, sharing information, engaging collaboratively with industry and academia, and doing everything possible collectively as a Department of Defense to expedite getting solutions to the warfighter. If you're not engaged with us here, there's just a lot that goes on that you can participate in to learn, engage, collaborate, and help us solve problems. And that's why you're here for this prize challenge information session. Aaron, I think you're off camera right now, but would you like to talk a little bit about the Naval X Tech Bridges? Aaron Baker is the director of the Central Florida Naval X.
Absolutely. Yep. So because of the community that we have here in Team Orlando, we have the ability to stand up what we call the Naval X Tech Bridge. So because we used to be ahead, the government in general used to be ahead of innovation. We had a number of technologies that were coming out, everything from GPS to memory foam and different things that we were putting out into the community. At this point, industry is way further ahead of us than we are. And so in order to close that gap, Naval X decided to stand up what they call the Tech Bridge community. We are one of 18, soon to be more than that, across the country and overseas. There's locations in London and Japan and Hawaii. And so each of these different locations is associated with a warfare center. We all have our specialties. We all have the things that we do really, really well. It's a very robust network that we have the ability to access. So we have the Naval X Tech Bridge. Because we have that, we were able to build the physical and the virtual space that we call the Tech Grove, the Central Florida Tech Grove. And that's why we are able to put on challenges like this one. We have a partnership with UCFRF, the UCF Research Foundation, through a PIA, a partnership intermediary agreement that allows us to put on things like prize challenges and tech scans and things that are outside of the realm of FAR-based contracting. That means we can go a little bit faster. We can work hand in hand with you to collaborate on solutions and to help bring solutions to the warfighter faster. The goal is to increase those of you, if you've never worked with us before, we want to work with you. We want to hear from you. We want to be able to get these technologies in the hands of people who need to use them much faster. So that's the entire goal. Why the Tech Bridge was stood up in Orlando was to leverage the community that we have, the robust academic, government, industry community that we have here, and all of the expertise that we have at the Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division. You want to talk about Tech Grove?
Yeah, absolutely. I know many of you are already part of the Tech Grove family. If you're not, just what I'd like you to understand is that while we are part of a robust community of Department of Defense funded innovation centers, there are a couple of things that make us different as well, because we're all a little different. One, we are very focused on human performance through stimulation and training, and just it's not all about a headset, as I like to remind folks in this space. Training takes place in a lot of different formats. And as you're seeing from this prize challenge, sometimes solving problems to address human performance through stimulation and training are not about creating a training system. It is sometimes about solving the business process problems, which is what this challenge is really all about. It is to enable the Navy to get to contract faster so that those solutions can be delivered to the fleet faster. But the other thing that really sets us apart is all those logos that you see along the bottom. Tech Grove, we opened our doors a little over 4 years ago. From the very beginning, we were funded by the 4 core services, stood up by the Navy, who holds our partnership intermediate agreement, but equally funded by the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps. And it's okay if you don't know what all those logos are. I'll just say it's multiple parts of the Army. It is the Defense Health Agency. It is soon to be Space Force STARCOM that is in the process of joining us, and another office out of the Pentagon, which is actually very focused on sustainability and environmental and energy related activities for all the military bases. So we are finding ourselves growing as others hear about this unusual collaboration and the capability that our customers have allowed us to develop. If you're not part of our community and on our email list and know about all the events, then please be sure you go to our website and sign yourself up so you can stay connected. And with that, we are going to start into the core of this. Navy is one of the best for long-term business, however lean and mean. There you go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Larson. All right, the next few slides are going to very heavily involve our 2 key Navy folks here, who I will give them a chance to just tell you who they are. Speaker may be a little bit of a misnomer. They're really our subject matter experts and directors, as you can see, really the key activities that this prize challenge will affect. So Robin, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Robin Wyckhorst, I'm the Director of Acquisition Management, Program Management here at NAWCTSD.
Greg Doherty, Director of Procurement, Chief Contracting Office, so lead the team that does all the contracting efforts for NAWCTSD.
So we're going to help make your life a little easier here, hopefully. Is that the goal?
That's the goal.
Okay. All right, with that, if we could just have one or both of you go through the problem itself. I do have a few questions on the next slide. I think all of you have seen, this is straight from the prize challenge page. So the questions that we're going to go through on the next slide, and then any questions that you might want to answer about the problem. We'll get into the solution after this, but this is the goal, right? Focusing on sole source solicitations and proposals that NAWC receives. How can that front end technical evaluation be expedited and used to build the business case and enabling them to get to contract faster? So let's just talk about the current process. Whichever of you would like to tackle that. Just a quick overview of what's for sole source. So just a quick acquisition process, and what does the technical evaluation look like?
Yeah, sure. So the two primary methods that we have to satisfy warfighter needs are through acquisitions, which we do by contracting method, and organic capability. So we focused on the acquisition methods. And within acquisition, there are two primary means to achieve a contract. One is competitively, where multiple offers are allowed to compete for the work, and we do that through a competitive evaluation. And then sole source or single source. And in that methodology, we receive a single proposal for a particular effort, and we evaluate it in a different way than we evaluate a competitively solicited proposal set. So the primary basis of determining a fair and reasonable price is to establish reasonableness of all of the various cost elements that go into that overall price. And the primary way to establish reasonableness on a good portion of that proposal is through the technical evaluation, which looks at the reasonableness of the cost elements, labor mix, so the types of labor categories, the quantity of hours, the spread of those labor categories and hours over time. Each period in a particular offer's accounting cycle would carry with it different rates, both direct and indirect. There's material elements that go into the various types of solutions that we provide to the warfighter. It could be commercially available items, right? Costs that the bill of materials would carry forward, the quantity of the different nomenclatures of the material that we buy, and the suitability of that has to be evaluated. So for some visual displays, right, there's maybe 5 channels, 7 channels that establish that field of view. All of that has to be considered by the technical evaluation. The trips and duration of those trips, the locations of those trips, should the trip last 7 days with 2 people? Should it be 5 days with 3 people? Elements of the technical proposal or what need to be evaluated to feed into what inevitably will establish the reasonableness of the business case, which the Navy calls a business clearance memorandum. Other elements that marry up with that technical evaluation when it comes together on the contract specialist desk are rate information, so that would be direct labor rates, and indirect rate information, overheads, G&A. There are obviously prices associated with all that materials. So if it's going to be a certain amount of servers, the type of server, currently all this is done manually, right? We'll go out and manually pull sometimes it's through sampling, sometimes it's through historical comparisons, but it's very manual process.
Tedious.
Very manual
making me
process.
tired.
Yeah, we've got some databases that we hold, and you can do rough searches and queries, but nothing that's truly automated in any sort of way, and all very labor intensive.
Wow, yeah. And how much does it tend to be fraught with some inaccuracies? Because this is such a tedious, and how do you even know, how would I know where to look for fair and reasonable prices to compare?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of training that we provide to our contracting folks and to the rest of the IPT that are involved in this process. But as many people as are in this room and are on this call or at NAWCTSD,
Right.
are that many different life experiences that guide people in different directions. So the truth be told is I could give the same technical proposal to 2, 5, 15 people at NAWCTSD, and I would probably get that many different responses back in terms of why that person feels that that's a reasonable or unreasonable position in any particular cost element. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. One of the questions you wanted to address particularly was how this evaluation impacts just NOC achieving its mission and vision and getting solutions faster out there.
Right. So one of the questions, question 3 actually, is on average, how long does it take, right? So this is the data we have, and then there's probably also a subjective, what do you think answer to this? But the data says out of 160 individual technical evaluation records that we have detailed in our procurement management tool right now, the average is 29.9 days to do a technical evaluation.
Okay.
Some longer than that, some a little bit shorter than that, but that's 29.9 days. And so to tie it back to how do technical evaluations impact NAWCTSD's vision, it's kind of twofold. One is it supports the business case, and we have to establish a fair and reasonable price, and we want to establish a fair and reasonable position for the government and for the contractor, right? We want to make sure that we get into a relationship that there's no animosity when you get into it. You never want to start a relationship off where one party feels like they lost, where you feel like you really got, taken to the woodshed. You want to feel like you're going in as a team. And so number one is you want to establish a fair and reasonable price that everyone can get on board with and feel that truly represents not only the cost that goes into the work, but the necessary assumptions of risk and those elements. But number 2, and more important potentially even than the price that we pay, is if we don't get this right, at the end of a contract, we don't get what's right. We don't necessarily get a product that is beneficial to the fleet, a service that is beneficial to the fleet, because when we shortchange the negotiation, when we don't put the right amount of risk tolerance into that deal, we pressure the contractor to try and get tighter on that price, inevitably through performance, that results in a little bit more of the sort of cut corners and maybe not quite give us the right solution. Maybe it's a okay solution, but not really the solution that's going to work the best for the warfighter. Robin, other thoughts on that?
No, I think you hit it. It's just trying to get it out faster and being more efficient, and the standardization is huge. We're removing that variation that we see between all of the experiences that are brought. So,
so faster, fairer, maybe more equitable, accurate, maybe even with AI ML, maybe even more detailed or more in-depth technical evaluations. Is that a goal?
Supportable.
Consistent.
It's consistent.
Consistent, yeah. Consistent.
It's supportable, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll get technical evaluations so the way this works in practice is, the IPT will sit down with this technical proposal, and day 1 through day 1 plus 3, 4, 5 days is just trying to understand what they've got in front of them to start with. And they start to try and figure out these basis of estimates. And depending on the size of the proposal, you could be talking hundreds, if not thousands, of individual BOEs that are going into this proposal. And each BOE is detailing out a very, very extended WBS portion of the schedule, right? You could be down to an individual meeting and attendance.
WBS
work breakdown structure.
Okay.
So the team's just trying to figure out what they've got to start with, right? And then they start trying to figure out how to tabulate these these BOEs into a bigger picture perspective of CLIN pricing and inevitably contract pricing. Yeah.
What tools are the evaluators using now? Do you have some online project management tools is one of the questions that was asked, or?
Templates, we follow standard templates.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we handed out, I think, with the challenge, some of the products we have. We have the NAVCTSD technical evaluation instruction. We have a homegrown technical evaluation training that we give sort of just in time and on demand. So the technical team and other members of IPT will come to us and get that training. But it's really kind of that, like I said earlier, going into it, trying to figure out what you've got, then you have to figure out how to support that, right? So the difference between a good technical evaluation and one that doesn't quite get it is when we're audited, when someone comes down and looks at our files, right? They want to see, 100 hours to do task A, right? Nobody wants to see acceptable. There needs to be some degree of rationalization or justification that goes with that. Acceptable because.
Okay. So there's a narrative that would be provided, there's references back to data sources, that all of that you would expect are in there, and that you would want the tool to obviously smartly, intelligently include.
Absolutely.
And construct that narrative.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think do you think we've covered this question 5? What issues with the current outcomes you'd like to eliminate? Is there anything else about what you get now and what gets passed on to the next stage?
Well, I think, from my perspective, and Chris is a PCO that deals with this every day, right? And really, I view this is definitely a product that we rely on in contracting, and it would be super helpful to get that the first time where it's in the right format. But we've got some amazing engineers on our teams and some amazing IPT members right across the board. And it just seems like a lot of times they come in and they haven't done it in a while, right? And they've got a million things going on. So if this tool, the solution could help them move along that learning curve, right? Get them to that, right, where it's not, so new every time, right?
They start over each time. Jump in, new team, they haven't done it, for a year.
Thousands of things going on in an individual IPT, and the engineers have to be out testing one day, they've got to be evaluating one thing. Right. So
I'm glad you used the word help, because I wanted to emphasize that the intent is not that this will be the answer that you use, right? This is a tool, it's a help, it's a support, but the human element in the decision-making is always going to trump what an AI tool would produce, right? Which it should with most things, I think.
Because we'll still have to stand by the decisions we make using this tool. So this tool should hypothetically make our time more efficient on walking through that process. We use that to help us make the decision, but of course we're not going to, just take it without putting a human in the loop.
Verify but trust. Trust but verify, as we talked about last time, right here.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Who is this? All right, there are some questions in the chat, so we're gonna go to some of the questions in here. I did answer the question about will the slides be shared. They will not be shared apart from the recorded presentation, because the slides themselves are not providing any real information that's not out there already. The value of this session is the conversation and additional information that you're getting from our
They're asking about the procurement
experts here
today.
Yeah,
So that's not, when we're referring to the program or the procurement management tool, we're talking about tracking those pre-award, but we don't have a tool today.
They'll have a specific platform that's a PM.
That's right. And technical evaluations today are primarily either in a Word document individually by contract, or some combination of Excel spreadsheets. More complicated ones will use DCMA cost models, or potentially ProPricer if you happen to be dialed into a little bit of that. Brian and the cost group, I know you guys have databases full of data you use, but that's proprietary or CUI type information that you use internally, but it's not typically use to actively evaluate, right?
Correct.
So a few of the other questions here, which is, how does the Navy define the balance between under management and over management? How to automate red flags? I mean, there are some things that almost seem like they could be a little subjective, like the distribution of labor, is travel reasonable? So there's some of that in this question. So how would an AI tool learn to do that correctly, where there's that subjective element?
I don't know.
That's what we
that's why they're here.
Okay, see?
That's why they're
Exactly.
here. But I'll leave you with some to get you off the guardrails on this. Couple terms of art that we use, right? So number one is the FAR. One of the probably most prevalent words in the FAR is the word reasonable. That in and of itself is subjective, right? What's reasonable to Chris may not be reasonable to me. And so you have to be able to reasonably rationalize why, right? So it's as long as you support the position you take, I would say all pricing deals that we come up with probably have a range of what's reasonable, right? So it's probably not usually 10 hours. It's usually like somewhere between 7 and 12 because, right? And anywhere in there would probably be reasonable. And GAO uses a term more often than not for cost realism, but it's a great term that you can apply to all of this, right? One need not achieve scientific certainty on this. The idea is to reasonably formulate a position that you believe in a normal course of events, the position you've established is likely where you'd expect to land, and both parties will feel like they've come out in a position they can live with, right? So I would take the guardrails off a little bit and kind of feel, as long as we can support it, it'd be great to see, right?
Source documents. Will source documents that serve as training data be available to use to train an AI agent? And I think we had somebody ask this in a question that was submitted on challenge.gov. Trying to remember the actual documents we provided. I don't think there was any actual training data. There were no examples of past sole source proposals, which we also got a question about. So when we get into talking about the solution, perhaps we can think a little bit about, for the solutions that are submitted, if they use data sets that are analogous to or representative of what training data might be, is that going to be acceptable? So we'll think about that, get to that. What's currently informing the price thresholds or curated sources for establishing pricing visibility? A lot of that perhaps based on just experience and knowledge and sources that you're familiar with, that the evaluators are familiar with. What would be your response to informing the price thresholds today? That we're tackling.
Does the technical team want to try and tack that on, Brian?
Yeah, so Brian, introduce yourself here. I don't know if you're on camera here, but
Yeah, my hand. Yeah, I'm Brian Turner. I'm responsible for the cost and schedule division here at NAWCTSD. So sometimes when you're looking at thresholds, the first go around, it generally is the technical evaluator says, oh, I don't feel that that's appropriate or whatever. So they kind of use their experience, if you will. But more like what we would like to have is something that says, here is a historical rendering of what we would anticipate for this, either a number of hours or this type of work breakdown structure. I remember one time when I was doing an evaluation that I came in with a historical percentage of what we typically would experience on a NAWCTSD training system contract and compared it to the hours that the contractor provided. And I was able to say, okay, so your hours represent X% of your total bid, and our historical value for that is in this range. And then they were able to say, oh, okay, well, we can make an adjustment to our hours then, because they were a new business taking on some of the stuff with training systems. So they probably allocated their hours in a different way. But to me, seeing something like that where we could say, okay, here's what we would historically see, and we could plug a value in there and see what the percentage is relative to the hours that the contractors proposed, so as the technical team's just going through and they're plugging in the hours into this automated tool and be able to have this continue to retain kind of a historical values, then we can pull that in and say it's reasonable because out of the 160 contracts that we've had, we typically see program management hours range in this percentage of the total contract value. So now we have a better comfort level, better way to say, yes, this is a reasonable number of hours for that. It's not just where someone puts a thumbs up or does
You have
their
support for
experience.
that.
We have a historical value that kind of continues to build. That this tool is designed in such a way that those the values that are put into it can then continue to be retained in a database, and then you can say, okay, pull in our database and compare it to this particular proposal that's already just come in. Then we would be able to say, oh, yep, it's fallen right in the range of this type of contract. We could even identify it by the type of training system. If it's a classroom trainer, if it's a tabletop trainer, if it's a aircrew trainer, whatever it is, we could sort that in the database such that you just pull that in and click on it and say, okay, we're doing this type of trainer, boom. And then
These are reasonable.
here comes the ranges for all the proposals that we've had over the course of time. And, we could even pull in some of our historical stuff and do that to populate the database, and then the tool it'd be so much faster to just go in, and if we identified from the contractors saying, put your proposals in this format, because we're going to use this tool to just populate the tool, and we click the button at the end and there's all the stuff, and we can go WBS by WBS or CLIN by CLIN, and we say it's reasonable because it's based on our historical database with all this stuff in it, and it's tailored to the type of trainer that we're doing. So, to me, automating some of that aspect of things is really what will help us to get through these proposal evaluations a lot faster, and help the PCOs, the procurement contracting officers, to be able to say, yeah, I feel comfortable awarding or negotiating down on this particular CLIN because historically this is what it's been, and we've gotten great products out of these other proposals that are in our database, so we know that's really what it would take to do this kind of thing, unless it's unique, and then you could even have some kind of a adjustment value or something to say it's a little bit more complex, but
The costs have gone up dramatically.
or something,
Right.
supplier database issues or whatever it is.
So we have several questions here that relate to sources, resources, input. The source input to start that, is it like an SBI proposal? Well, I mean, it's a proposal, right? Not necessarily an SBIR like proposal, but.
Yeah, I think probably all proposals originate off a requirements document, right? So you have sales specs, seed rules, and that drives really what that WPS should look like in turn, the BOEs that go with that, the bombs, the travel requirements, right? So I think you start with the sales specs, seed rules, requirements package. Terms and conditions are gonna, to an effect, have some impact on things depending on what type of clauses we've put in a particular contract. And then, of course, the proposal goes on top of that, right? You're trying to say, all right, for this requirement, does this proposal wrap around this nicely? If not, what stands out as good, what stands out as bad? Where should we look for efficiencies?
I mean, it's a proposal document, right? And all proposals are gonna look a little bit different depending. There's kind of standard sections, I think, that you're gonna put in any proposal. But if the question is, if you're not familiar with writing government proposals other than an SBI proposal, and that's what your understanding of these kind of proposals is based on, which maybe where this question is coming from, is that understanding of that model helpful to understand, and I would say yes. I mean, all these same elements are in there, right? It's a statement of work, it's technical work plan, it's but detailed budget, it's rates, it's all that. So.
Generally, yeah, and the easiest way to conceptualize what these proposals look like in a lot of ways would actually be to focus on an above truthful negotiations valued proposal, because that's kind of detailed in part 15, the format of what that should look like. So those details are provided in the FAR.
Yeah.
Kind of below that, it's a little more flexible. It's not necessarily certified cost or pricing data, so that they can have a different look to the proposal. And sometimes it's not quite the BOE build out. More difficult to work your way through sometimes. But.
Robin, several of the questions here, not surprising, because we get this every time we do this, are, you know, can we get samples of this? Can we get samples of that? I didn't pre-clear this answer with everybody here, but what I'm going to communicate at this point is that there is a considerable amount of government furnished information for this challenge already. If you read through the challenge page and looked at the Google Drive, there's actually probably more GFI for this challenge than we typically have. But given all the questions that are here, what we typically do is, following this information session, our subject matter experts and our customers from the Navy will look at these questions, and if they make the decision that you want to provide additional information, it might make sense, then that will be put in that folder. But I will say that they've already provided a significant amount of information.
You can also point to open sources,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
DAU, there's a number of sources on DAU, there's a number of sources on ACT So I definitely encourage you to look at the sources that are already out
So
there.
if you're not, that's a thank you, because some of you may or may not be familiar with ACQ notes, acquisition notes, which is a endless resource of all sorts of things. Thank you. And DAU, Defense Acquisition University. Now, some of you on the call are, you know, you've not done a lot perhaps in this space. That's the whole point of, we're trying to get you involved, because you're not deeply experiencing defense contracting. So these are some resources to use. And if you have questions about them, feel free to communicate those, and we'll point you to them. The question about SBIR is, we're not going to have time to get into all of these. Can we get an example of a work breakdown structure to use as a source file, even if it's redacted? I'll go back to the comment that I just made. That will be considered, but I think for now, consider the resources that are there, probably what is going to be provided. LTPA versus best value. That is a different sort of evaluation in a way.
So the focus is sole.
Yeah, focus is sole source.
Sole source, so yeah. So I think a question that we have on the next section is actually, why did you choose sole source proposals as the focus for this challenge outcome to try the solutions with? Why sole source?
Yeah, anybody besides me want to try interest? I've got an answer, but I'm interested.
You got the procurement.
Yeah, because honestly, I think it's an easier problem set to deal with. We do have plenty of problems in a competitive evaluation that are similar to that of a sole source in terms of the same common types of problems. But when you're talking about the subjectivity and comparative basis involved in a competitive evaluation, I thought
More complexity.
Yeah.
I thought it would be better for us to, let's start with this one, right? And then see how this proves out. And then maybe the next stage would be to go after something that potentially could help us in one or more elements of a competitive.
It's maybe a way to control the number of variables that we have.
Yeah.
And we already, it's already going to be challenging enough to apply the AI.
Right.
We need, this.
But if you've got a proposal, but you still have to provide the business case behind it. You have to do the technical evaluation. You have to
We still
go
spend a
through-
lot of time.
still spend just as much
Technical
time
evaluations,
probably,
yes.
right, with any other
It's
proposal.
the process of helping us identify whether the proposal is meeting the requirements
Yeah.
as stated.
Some of the other questions here we will be answering later on in the session, and I do want to move on to the solutions part. So for those of you in the room, Navy experts here, the Navy team, are there any of these questions you want to tackle? Some of them are related to the solution, so we're going to hold those till the next session. I think we've answered the question about. Okay, if we move on,
What was that bottom one on inflation? Inflation.
let's see.
No.
Down one.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Very strong time value of money. Yeah, so for all of our requirements that we evaluate the proposal on, we usually put in like a global escalation or inflation type
Mhm,
factor.
mhm.
And then we also have part of our profit analysis looks at the time value of money effectively, right? And so I would say that we do account for all that. That's in the business clearance portion, not on the technical evaluation side. Certainly tools that help us with that, maybe outside of this challenge down the road would be great, but not, I don't think it's within the boundaries of this one necessarily.
Our goal with this challenge, as all of our challenges, is for you to be able to generate some minimal prototypes, right? That can at least prove that your approach to the problem works. So the data sets that you decide to use, maybe it's from a proposal you've written to someone, put yourself in the evaluator's position and use some of those, your own proposals for data sources. But let's.
Sorry, on the question
yeah.
that talked about samples, I think it asked for 10 to 20 samples. It could get a little hard, right, to redact all that information, but the training that we provided really does go through, it is effectively a sanitized technical evaluation, right? So if you look at that, that is in essence what someone like Chris would be looking for when his IPT lead and engineer logistician come to his desk with a, hey, we're ready to, when they get the contract specialist with them, and Chris is like, oh, let's lay this deal out.
Right.
And that's that technical evaluation training package we gave reflects what most of our contracting officers would say this is the threshold of good. This is where we would like to be on.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah. So going back to the point that there's a good bit of GFI already provided, so be sure you take a look at that. And I think some of these questions that are being asked will be answered when you do that. Right. The solution, in talking about the problem, hopefully that gives you a good bit of insight into what you want the solution to be, because we're talking about some of the things we want to eliminate, right? Now, in terms of characteristics of the solution and its functionality, and let me insert here that the evaluation, the judging criteria are also detailed on the challenge page, and along with some technical requirements for the solutions you submit. So a lot of that's already provided for you, but just at a functional level in terms of what you'd like this solution to be. There's a question about, does it need to be FedRAMP certified and all that? That may be beyond this challenge, but what are some of the things you're going to look for as you look at some of the solutions submitted?
So, I think we discussed this on looking for multiple approaches, and one company might look at one architecture, provide a solution. Another one has a completely different approach to it. So, I think that we're looking for, bring them all, bring your ideas. What could help shorten this process for us? So, I think we don't even know what this looks like yet. We're just looking at potential ideas. You could bring a demo. Maybe what you have is a a larger concept of a much larger architecture that you don't bring the demo, you bring, laying out the architecture for that. So it's going to vary, I expect.
That's an important point. Thank you, Robin, that you may not all submit a video or, of an actual, that shows an actual software, AI software tool working. It may be, to your point, more of a model or a simulation of something that you have a bigger vision for. Right?
That's right, yeah. And when you look at the artifacts we provided, it's important that the work product not be overly complicated in terms of the output, right? We're looking for a reasonably supported position, ideally one that is flexible and gives us some negotiation room, right? You don't want like as I alluded to earlier, you don't want the 10 hours, take it or leave it. You want, somewhere in this range, so that when the negotiator, the specialist, and the PCO sit down with the contractor, we've got room to maneuver, try and find that sweet spot of what's going to work for both sides, right? So something that's flexible and adaptable to the situation, something that obviously the engineers, once they get that 80% solution or whatever this provides, can then come in and lay on there, okay, so you got it here, I'm not quite agreeing with the solution here, I want to make some adjustments, something that would allow for that type of oversight and, kind of get it back in the box that we want to be in as a team.
So we ended up in this area, we had a tabletop exchange, and we had a number of ideas that were thrown out of that tabletop exchange. And there were ideas about how to align the government with industry with respect to the types of data that they go through and what they're expected to provide, right? And I think one of the ideas that was thrown out was like a TurboTax, right? Some sort of a very simplistic type of software that would guide them through, and both sides would be aligned on exactly what would be in that type of software. Is that one of the ideas you're, sort of considering when you look at these things coming in?
Yeah, so big picture, this would be down the road outside this challenge, but it would be great if it was modular to a larger system, right? So if you think TurboTax, maybe this is the years ago on TurboTax they had where if you make donations, you can go to a separate modular but complementary component to that software suite, enter in your donations, that would then feed over into your TurboTax screen you're doing your taxes. Well, if you have if you think of TurboTax almost as your business clearance, well then maybe there's the weighted guidelines module where that's where we do profit, and maybe there's the technical evaluation. Wouldn't it be amazing if the offers could actually use the offers module right into that sort of type of thing? So I'm just thinking modularity, something that the government's really good at finding a solution that, all right, we're going to use this for this, but it doesn't talk to anything else. It would be helpful to get something that makes this process smoother, but it's still at the back end, there's a bunch of manual work that has to be done, meaning you have to take everything out of a PDF and type it into a spreadsheet, right? That just becomes, all we're really doing is transferring really smart engineering labor into a whole bunch of clerks that have to sit there and type stuff in spreadsheets, right? So so modularity and the ability to expand in the future would be nice.
The ability to expand in the future, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I want to just emphasize, because we get this with every price challenge we do. It's like participants come to the table and they're looking for specificity. They're looking for, tell me exactly what you want. And the whole point of this again is not to, right? So please don't be constrained or lose a lot of sleep over feeling like you don't know exactly what this should look like. The goal is, given the problem, given the documents and the information that have been provided to you, given other information you may find out there on acquisition notes or DAU or anywhere else, we want you to submit something that will show that your approach will work, will solve this problem of reducing time, producing more accurate, more comprehensive results, which is fundamentally what AI, almost every use of AI is intended to do to some degree or other. So just keeping this in mind and using the resources that you have. There's several questions here about what would happen next. Is there money to move this forward? And I'll have somebody here address it, but one of the things that we tried to communicate in the challenge information is that this whole challenge is structured in a way that if you submit a solution, you have met the competition requirements. And those that submit solutions, certainly the ones that come out as prize winners, but even those that don't, if the Navy sees potential in what you have, and if should they choose to move forward with further development using another acquisition path, they can do that because the competitive requirements have been addressed. And that gets to the question that someone asked about, would we be open to a demo of a potential solution prior to the challenge timeline? And the answer is no, because that would take it out of the element of being fair, being equitable, and meeting the competition requirements. But that's what.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, it would be very difficult to be extremely specific on what solutions we're looking for, other than defining the problem as well as we know how to do. This is, these are the challenges that we experience. You may find a solution to the technical evaluation to find out, how reasonable the proposal is. You may have something that assists with the business clearance. You may have a price reasonableness solution, and we're open to all of them because basically all of those solutions help us. But we don't even know what you could propose that could help us where we'd say, I didn't even think of that. So other than defining the problem that the best we know how, it's hard to be very specific on the solutions.
You're all innovators. That's why we're doing this, right? So that you have the freedom to innovate, because knowing some of you and probably how you think, when there's a problem, you get jazzed about trying to figure out a solution. And that's the goal here.
We've talked a lot about, from the procurement side, what we would like to see and things of that nature. We've got a couple technical experts in the room.
Yeah.
Is there anything specific that you're looking for when you look at these types of solutions? What are some of the elements that you hope to see? Is there anything specific?
Yeah, no, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyson Griffin. I'm the Director of Science and Engineering at TSD. So the first thing I would say is that, kind of piggybacking on what Carolyn was saying, we talk about tech scans and other things that we can do within the tech grove in community. So this is a prize challenge, but we have left this one deliberately open the way it is because it is almost a tech scan that we're conducting here, utilizing a prize challenge. So getting back to that point of innovation, we're asking you to come forward with your innovative ideas within this very broad problem space of speeding up and improving our ability to conduct our sole source technical evaluations that leads to a quicker business clearance to move forward within our acquisitions. So that's why if we sound a little obtuse right now this afternoon, it's not, it's almost on purpose, because we are purposely asking you guys to come to us and wow us a month and a half from now with what you think could solve things, or maybe that you're already working in the space. There are multiple companies out there. Someone had earlier in the thing about some other SBIRs that were popped out there. There have been very specific requirements placed out there by the DoD, by the government. ACBOT, for example, comes to mind. These are things that are actually already out there being worked. We're asking for our technical community through the Tech Grove here in Central Florida to come to us and wow us with what we would like to see. And we don't know what we want to see. We wanted you to bring it to us. And so when we see it, we're going to go, oh, we really like that.
We'll know it when we see it.
You'll know it when you see it, or
Now,
you'll know them when you see them, because it's not out of the realm of possibility at all that there will be more than one solution submitted that you look at and then say, hey, we could buy those 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And we actually had that happen out of one of our other prize challenges where 2 of the teams had solutions that actually fit together really nicely and are now working together.
Yeah. But Greg kept referring back to a couple of the items that are posted with the challenge that we were calling the GFI that we've provided. Two of those, the technical evaluation request and response form, and the other one is the technical evaluation work product check sheet and everything. So from a technical side, and again, because you're hearing us say, like, maybe we can't give you redacted data to train models and stuff, so you might be limited there. But there are areas within that entire template process that if you were to choose one area, like, hey, I think I got tool sets that can target that particular feature. We call them features that we're evaluating in the proposal process and the BOEs that come through from the contractor. So if you choose it, and I'll use an easiest one is bill of materials, because most bill of material data, especially for COTS, commercial off-the-shelf technologies, it's out there. You can Google that, and that's usually what our engineers do. They go and they do a lot of Googling to figure out what fair and reasonable prices are across the marketplace. And most of you that have done contracting know you do your 3 sources and you get your numbers and you do all that. So it's the same thing when we're producing these reasonableness evaluations. If you have a way to help us be able to do that quicker, more efficiently and effectively, and take that time off of a human having to do that a lot, and let that human go and do more of the critical thinking work, then that accelerates the process and everything. A couple of other areas that are more difficult. When we get our engineers and our technologists, technicians, they get this information, they go through the process. There are, as Greg alluded to earlier, there might be thousands of items. There might be thousands of inputs. There might be hundreds of BOE features that are coming through. And sometimes on some of these proposals, you have a prime and they have subprimes. And those subprimes produce their BOEs and the prime produces their BOE. And for example, there might be duplication of effort in those BOEs. That takes human effort to go and try to correlate all that together and figure it out. If you assume that you receive all that information, is there automation that could help that technical team find all of those duplication of efforts across the different BOEs? And sometimes they're deliberate. So I'm not gonna say they're deliberate, but sometimes they could be deliberately worded in different ways. So that makes it harder for you to find that they're duplication of effort. So tools that would help understand, even semantically, the things that people are proposing in their BOEs would help teams move faster and will be more effective and efficient. Joey, what are some other areas that you've got long history. So Joey Johansson is our chief engineer at TSD, many years of experience of looking through these things. What else do you think?
So another big challenge is aligning the BOEs to the CLIN structure and the contract, so you actually understand how the cost of a given product, end item product being purchased by the Navy is actually being designed, developed, tested, and delivered, and aligning all those costs to the correct CLIN so you can understand the true cost of the product. So, training device could be electronic classroom, could be technical data. So trying to pull out of the BOEs all of the costs associated with those individual items so that when the technical proposal goes to the contract specialist, it's easy to understand, after lots and lots of days, months, and hours, that these BOEs are assigned to this CLIN structure, and the engineering team or technical team has determined that this is what should be a reasonable and a technical assessment for that particular product in the proposal. Very time consuming, depending on the structure of the BOE and the clarity of the BOE as provided by the contractors.
And there's one question there about would we like a co-pilot?
Right.
I'm old, so I will say I like Clippy. Everybody remembers old Clippy and
It's much
stuff.
cuter.
But no,
They told me it was virtual when I went
the
all
idea
across town.
of,
Told you it was virtual?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. I wondered why you're back so
Yeah.
soon. Come on.
yeah, sorry, obviously something sucks. But maybe your use of the push to talk button sucks. But anyway, so Copilot is yeah, we would, like Aaron mentioned earlier, the idea of a TurboTax or something, but anything we would like to see areas where you could assist that also does not make it complicated of use. Other judging criteria includes the sustainability of the product. So again, if a product solution, or an idea, an architecture comes forward that does not require a lot of work to maintain, to update, to keep up to speed, with changing environment, then that's a positive for the innovation that we're looking for products that can actually be utilized and sustained as a helping tool, that is supportive of the mission, but is not a direct deliverable to the warfighter.
Anyone else? Anything you want to share here?
And I do want to add that while we've been talking, I've been kind of investigating, there are sample proposals out there, there are sample BOEs out there.
Yeah.
All of this data,
Yeah.
if you look on the different open source places that you can on the internet, you will find
Right.
all of this. So we could comb through all of the records and try to de-identify everything, but I don't think it's going to give you anything
Right.
more than what is out there. I mean, would you guys agree?
Great, thank you. All right, well, in the 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes we have left, I do want to make sure we just walk through the general process. I'm purposely not pulling up the challenge page, which has a lot of detail. We spend a lot of time putting that together. So you have hopefully read that. If not, you see the first sentence, read it thoroughly. It's very comprehensive. And if you have any questions that do come to mind that relate to the process itself that you see on the challenge page, on challenge.gov, you do have there's a function there that you can ask a question. And we monitor those and we will provide an answer. In fact, when the questions come in and you see it, actually I'm kind of jumping down to the bottom one here. As we get questions on that contact page from challenge.gov, we will be collecting all of the questions and answers as we receive them on a document in Google Drive, that same folder where all the government furnished information is, because it's important to us that all of you see the questions and the answers. So if there's something just specific to you that you want to ask, please don't send us that. It needs to be a question general enough that you're, not anything proprietary to you. And read the government furnished information. You've heard us repeatedly talk about all the information provided, and just understand that this is what you have is what is used now, and you can use a lot of this to better understand the context of what a technical evaluator does, the information they need to look at, the kind of output they need to provide, and that will give you some guidance as you structure your solution. Key days. In fact, I'm going to go on to the next slide and I'll come back to the one we were just on. Pay attention to the dates. When 11:59 p.m. Eastern, will still be in Eastern Daylight Time, I think, or Eastern Standard Time. Eastern Time, when that comes around, believe me, that's it. If you come in at 12:01 on the October 12th, doesn't matter. You don't meet the requirements. But please notice there are, you've registered for this information session, so kudos to you. You must register your intent to participate in the challenge. And there is a link on the challenge.gov page, and all of that information, there is a link to the page to do that. When you go to that page, what you will first see is all of the challenge information, and then the form to submit, the Monday form to submit your intent to participate. You must be registered, because starting at 12:01 a.m. on October 12th, when we send out additional information about how to submit solutions, anything else, it will only go to those that have registered their intent to participate. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the deadline to actually submit solutions is October 25th. Specific instructions on that, if there are any beyond what is in the challenge page that's out there now, will be sent to those who have registered to participate. You see that it's a pretty ambitious schedule for this, but I think there's so many of you that you have experience in AI, you have experience using artificial intelligence, machine learning to do very similar tasks. So this, and you may have something that already begins to tackle this, but with the goal of wanting to give a lot of visibility to this at ITSIC, then we know we're pushing the timeline here a little bit. Yes, Tyson.
Yeah, Carolyn, again, just emphasize to everybody again, when you look at the materials that were provided with the challenge, it doesn't have to do everything.
Right.
Look for something that you feel strongly that you are strong in,
Right.
and focus on that. Bring that
piece of it.
solution to us, that piece of the puzzle. It
Right.
does not have to be a bespoke turnkey solution for the entire process.
Right. That is not what we expect. Hopefully you heard that. And thank you, Tyson, for emphasizing that. We're looking for that minimal prototype that does just enough to show these folks that you know what you're doing and you have an approach that has viability to solve the problem, and that with some additional development, it could help solve the problem or solve a piece of it in combination with perhaps some of the other solutions. One of the questions asked was how the demo day would be structured. The semifinalist demo day will most likely be virtual. And the submissions, as you will see in the challenge document, if you haven't read it yet, it is a PowerPoint presentation, and there's specific detail on that challenge page about what the presentation should cover. The second piece is a link to a video. That video might be showing your solution actually running. It might be you narrating and walking through a demonstration of it. It might be a simulation of it. Whatever you choose, whatever you feel like adequately demonstrates your solution and its functionality and how it addresses the problem. But it's a link to a video. Do not send us your videos, and you'll see that in the instructions. At the demo day, as you see, November 18th, from that, we'll be down selected to 3 finalists that will do presentations at ITSIC on December 3rd, actually in the TechPro booth on the ITSIC show floor. And then the awards, the cash prize winners will be announced the next day in the Navy booth on the ITSIC floor. So an unusual amount of visibility, actually, for those of you that are participating in this, and certainly those that are finalists. But there are a lot of folks watching this because pretty much every service that we support, TechPro, needs this help. You know, it's not just, probably every government entity out there needs this help. It's certainly not just Navy, but Navy's helping lead the way on this. Going back to this slide, as I emphasized again, you must register to participate. When you register your intent to participate, you will be asked to list a point of contact. Then you will also be asked to list the contact information for your other team members, the name and the email address. All communications from TechGrow to those registered to participate will be sent to the point of contact. Please do not ask us to put everybody on your team on the email list. We will not do that. We will send it to the point of contact. So make sure whoever you put as the point of contact understands it is their responsibility to communicate with the rest of the team. It is also absolutely acceptable for you to team with another company. We've had plenty of solutions submitted for previous challenges where it was one or more companies that participated. Maybe you're an individual and you know, it's just you. Well, you may want another company, you may want somebody from a university to participate with you. That is fine, and probably would, you know, serve you well to team with someone who obviously has that complementary expertise, just like you would for any opportunity that you have. I believe we've covered everything there. Again, just like you would for any opportunity that you were pursuing, read the instructions, follow the instructions, be on time, give yourself plenty of time, and you will do well. Other questions, thoughts, comments from those of you that are the real experts and whose lives we're trying to make easier. So,
Now we're looking forward to the solutions.
yeah, all right. Everybody? Yeah, great.
Yeah, nothing beyond, I appreciate everyone's attention to this and an attempt to, any help will inevitably benefit the warfighter, right, which is what we're focused on. So if we can turn 29.9 days into 20 days, that's it's a good reduction, and that means we're getting stuff to the fleet that much faster, right, by way of shortening our process. So anything in any area, as Tyson mentioned, consider this an elephant. One big bite, one medium-sized bite would be a fantastic bite.
Okay. Anybody else? Tyson? I do note the question, and Tony, thank you for asking, can we get a list of the attendees or organizations interested in teaming? We generally don't send out these lists. We did not ask for permission ahead of time, so we would really not be able to, but I encourage those of you that are on here, in the few minutes we have, if you're interested in talking to Tony about what he does and how you might participate, send him a message privately. I'll leave the Zoom room open for a while so you can communicate if you'd like to with each other privately. And I'll just say that if you are in the local area, you're going to be in Orlando anytime soon when we have activities, then no better place to find potential collaborators than right here in Tech Road. So come on in. All right, with that, I think we will wind up. I'll just repeat again that the link to this recording will be put on a document and deposited in that GFI folder on Google Docs. If, that's a big if there is any additional information that the government team decides they want to provide, it will also go in that folder. Yeah. And we're just looking to see what all of you submit. All right, like I said, I will leave this room open for a little bit so that you can communicate with each other should you decide to, and thank you all for attending. We appreciate it.